Hey guys, tonight we saddle up for something a little different. You're not stepping into a marble temple or a medieval castle this time. You're climbing onto a Mongol pony, wrapping yourself in layers of fur and wool, and heading out into the endless grasslands of the steppe. The wind brushes past your face, dry and crisp, carrying the scent of wild thyme and horse sweat. You glance up at the sky. It's huge. Miles of open blue, not a single skyscraper or traffic jam in sight. Honestly, you probably wouldn't survive a week out here. The Mongol lifestyle involves a lot of horseback archery, sleeping under felt tents, and consuming more fermented dairy than your digestive system is likely prepared for. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your location and the time where you're watching from. I love knowing which corners of the world you're listening from, especially for sleepy stories like this. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the main cooking tent, the smoke from a dung-fueled fire curling lazily into the sky. This is the kitchenette, a restaurant kitchen with steel counters and blinking timers, but a nomadic Mongol gur, or yurt, where meals have to be made fast, simple, and portable. Imagine being a chef in the Mongol Empire around the 1200s. You're not working in a fancy palace kitchen and galloping off to the next battlefield or pasture before lunchtime. Gordon Ramsay would not last long here. But behind every conquest is a cook quietly boiling bones and stirring horse milk into butter. The soldiers eat on horseback, and so do you, chewing dried mutton while trotting across the steppe. Mongol chefs had to be masters of efficiency. Their main ingredients: meat, milk, with a side of you guessed it fermented mare's milk, called arag. It's like yogurt's rowdy older cousin. Sour, fizzy, and just alcoholic enough to make you forget you're drinking something that came from a horse. Historians still argue whether the Mongol army carried tiny portable ovens with them, or just used heated stones for cooking on the go. Some sources suggest they boiled meat in animal stomachs as makeshift pots. Yes, it sounds weird, but when you've got no ceramic or metal cookware handy, stomach lining is surprisingly heat-resistant. Plus, it doubles as a to-go bag. Early Tupperware, Mongol style. As you peer into a pot simmering over the fire, you catch the rich smell of lamb broth. Mongol cooks often made a dish called shilena, simple stew of meat, fat, and a few roots or wild herbs, if they were lucky. There's no garlic, confit, or microgreens here. Just survival food that somehow still manages to taste pretty good when you're cold and tired. The broth bubbles quietly. Instead, they flavored their dishes with the natural brine found in animal products. Milk, butter, and cheese provided all the seasoning they needed. It's probably not something you'd find in a Michelin-starred restaurant today, but for warriors constantly on the move, it worked. You sip a ladle of broth, the warmth spreading through your chest, and you can't help but think about how this cuisine shaped an empire. The Mongols didn't waste time planting crops or baking delicate pastries. Their food had to fuel long rides, sharp archery, and occasional invasions of entire continents. Some say their diet made them physically tougher, high in protein, low in carbs, and basically paleo before paleo was cool. But here's the fringe detail. Mongol cooks also practiced something called borts, a process of air-drying meat until it turned into ultra-lightweight jerky. Once dried, the meat could be pulverized into a powder, carried in a pouch, and later rehydrated into soup by just adding water. Instant ramen, 13th century edition. Soldiers could feed themselves with a pinch of meat dust stirred into hot water. You don't even have to get off your horse for that, as you stir the pot. You notice something else simmering nearby. Boiled sheep's milk, slowly separating into curds and whey. Mongol chefs made a kind of cheese called arowel, which they dried into rock-hard chunks. These were snacks for long rides, like protein bars, but much crunchier. So crunchy, in fact, that some travelers wrote about how chewing Ariwell could wear down your teeth. It's basically food and dental floss combined. You lean back against a saddlebag, watching the horizon stretch out forever. The fire crackles, and the smell of lamb fat lingers in the air. The Mongol cooks don't use spices like cinnamon or cloves. Those are luxuries from the Silk Road. But sometimes, if they're lucky, they'll gather wild onions or leeks growing along the rivers. Maybe toss in a few berries. A pinch of mystery. Mongol-style. The horses shuffle nearby, tails flicking lazily. You realize you're starting to get sleepy, lulled by the steady rhythm of the step and the hypnotic swirl of steam rising from the stew. The chefs keep working, stirring quietly, their hands practiced from years of repetition, and you know, what? Cooking for an empire might not be glamorous, but someone has to do it. Without these traveling chefs, there's no Genghis Khan conquering half the known world. There's no golden horde galloping across Eastern Europe. There's just a bunch of hungry warriors sitting around, complaining about how they skipped breakfast. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sounds of the nomadic camp fade into the background, the soft nickering of horses, the low hum of conversation, and the faint sizzle of meat on hot stones. You shift slightly on your saddlebag seat, adjusting the folds of your wool cloak as the day slides into twilight. The Mongol chefs, still moving methodically around the campfire, begin prepping for the next meal. Not because they're obsessed with food, though, let's be honest. They probably are, but because feeding thousands of people in motion is a full-time job. You wonder how many calories a Mongol warrior burned in a day. Spoiler alert, probably more than your smartwatch could handle counting. The cooking routine isn't just about meals, it's about survival logistics. Mongol chefs had to plan for everything: weather changes, sudden skirmishes, and the occasional yurt malfunction. Imagine trying to dice mutton in the middle of a dust storm. It's not exactly the Food Network kitchen set tonight. There's a special treat brewing in a bronze cauldron: fermented camel milk. Yes, camel, because if it walks, grazes, or gallops, the Mongols have probably figured out how to drink it. Historians still argue whether fermented camel milk was just a regional thing or a widespread delicacy across the empire. Some claim it was reserved for the elites. Others think everyone, from generals to goat herders, got a cup now and then. Either way, it's tangy, frothy, and absolutely not something you'll find in a modern smoothie bar. Unless that smoothie bar is trying really, really hard to go viral. The chefs start preparing dumplings called booze. Little pockets of dough stuffed with, you guessed it, more mutton. The dumplings are steamed over boiling water, using an improvised setup, a leather flap stretched over a pot. You watch the steam rise. Meat is for strength. Milk is for song. Which makes sense when you think about it. This culture is built around livestock. Sheep, goats, yaks, horses, camels. If it produces milk, it probably has a spot in the Mongol pantry. The empire was basically one giant traveling dairy aisle. A fringe culinary detail that might surprise you. Mongol cooks occasionally used mare's milk, not just for drinking, but for preserving meat. They'd soak slices of boiled meat in sour milk to extend its shelf life. It sounds strange, but acidic liquids can actually slow down spoilage. Sort of like early refrigeration if your refrigerator smelled like a barn. You glance toward the horizon, where the last pink ribbons of sunset fade into the steely blue of night. The portable kitchen is winding down, but the chefs are still busy. They're tying up bundles of dried cheese curds, storing them carefully for the road ahead. The Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe, and these humble food supplies fueled that expansion. No exotic spices, no five-course banquets, just practical, portable meals that kept everyone moving. And here's where the story gets even quirkier. Some accounts say Mongol warriors would store strips of meat under their saddles during long rides. The pressure and heat from the horse supposedly tenderized the meat while they traveled. Historians still argue whether this was an actual culinary method or just a campfire legend. Either way, it makes for an oddly specific mental image. You, bouncing along on horseback, wondering if tonight's dinner is getting softer under your saddle. Bon appétit, the dumplings finish steaming, and one of the chefs hands you a hot, doughy pouch. You bite in carefully, the juice nearly burning your tongue, but in a good way. There's no soy sauce, no dipping bowl, just the warm satisfaction of calories earned after a day on the move. As you eat, you notice a quiet lull settle over the camp. Horses munch at tufts of grass, the fire crackles low, and the chefs lean back against saddlebags, sipping fermented milk and watching the stars appear one by one. Mongol meals were about efficiency, sure, but they were also about togetherness. The yurt might not be big, but it holds a whole world of tradition. You think back to the first Mongol cookbooks, so wait, there weren't any. Mongol recipes were passed down by memory, through hands-on practice, and whispered advice by the fire. Measurements, forget about it. Mongol chefs eyeballed everything. Want to make broth? Throw in about this much meat and about that much water. It's cooking by instinct, not by cookbook. And yet somehow this food tradition endured for centuries. Some of these recipes still exist today in parts of Mongolia and Central Asia. You can still find Bort's jerky. It's living history, edible history. Really. The fire dies down to glowing embers. The chefs clean their simple tools. A few knives, a wooden ladle, a leather water pouch. You brush the crumbs from your lap and stretch the night air cool against your skin. The Mongol kitchen may be mobile, but it's no less essential than any grand palace feast. It's just quieter, humbler, and way more portable. And so as you sit there digesting your dumpling under a blanket of stars, you realize the secret of the Mongol chefs. They weren't just feeding warriors, they were fueling an empire, one steaming pot of broth at a time. They carried history in their saddlebags, in their cheese curds, and in their smoke-scented cloaks. You close your eyes, listening to the soft murmur of distant horses, the fading crackle of the fire, and the quiet breathing of a camp preparing for sleep. The recipes may be lost, but for a moment, you've tasted what it was like to be part of their world. The night folds in around you, soft and vast, like a woolen blanket stretched across the sky. The embers of the cooking fire glow faintly, there, light flickering and fading, casting tiny shadows that dance across the ground. You take a slow breath, letting the air fill your lungs and drift back out again as the sounds of the steppe grow quieter, softer, more distant. Your eyelids get heavier, your shoulders relax, and the rhythm of the camp settles into a low, sleepy hum. The horses shift in their sleep, their tails swishing gently, and the chefs roll out their blankets, curling up beside their cooking pots. Satisfied with another day's work done, the scent of lamb stew and boiled milk lingers just a little longer in the cool night breeze before dissolving into memory. The stars overhead are steady and unblinking, ancient watchers of travelers who've come and gone for thousands of years, and now, here you are, drifting alongside them, your mind gently unwrapping from the day's thoughts. There's no need to plan, no need to hurry. Just let yourself drift.